bless you. Another day, another session. The Lord is certainly good to us. We're going to soldier on. We have just finished chapter 5. If you remember quite clearly, it was about um, Ezekiel having to give a very, very stern message to, to Judah by way of 4 signs of judgment. 4 signs of judgment. And I don't really want to go through them again, but the signs, the, the signs of judgment are 4 clear signs that the Lord was going to send judgment, that the Almighty, let me say the Almighty, Adonai Elohim, he had clearly set out for Judah. And the 4 signs were: 1, Jerusalem being attacked and besieged; 2, there was really no escapability of the judgment that was coming. Everyone was going to feel it. Everyone that was within Jerusalem or even had escaped Jerusalem, they were going to receive judgment. There was going to be terrible suffering. And number 4, there was going to be utter destruction. Now, in chapter 6, the one in which we're going to do now, and this is just an introduction to chapter 6. It's more or less the broad heading for this one would be the end and judgment of false worship. Just as how Adonai Elohim, which is the Almighty, the same God that we serve today, as he dealt with his people, Judah, Israel, then because of false worship, in the day of the Lord, the coming day of the Lord, there was, or there is, underline is, put is in bold capital letters. There is going to be an end and judgment to the false worship that this world, humanity at the end of time, that this world has been doing, has been allowed to do. Is allowed the right word, or is doing? I mean, man is serving and worshiping himself. If he's not worshiping himself, he's worshiping the cosmos, which he's not supposed to. He's worshiping the animals, which he's not to. Humanity is worshiping the idols in which he has made with his own hands, and that he should not do. I mean, that is a no-no within the broad term. Humanity or human or the world are his people. Now we ourselves, we ought to know better, but we are doing worse. Can you imagine? Would you agree with me? I mean, I think I could clarify it by saying that we who know better, who know that we shouldn't serve anything else but the living God, we are doing that and even making the idols ourselves and giving it to the ungodly for them to worship. That's what we do. Now you may say, how are we doing that? Well, I'm sure that would take a long discussion anyway. I know sometimes to make broad statements and to allow our minds to run wild and say certain things can bring a kind of distaste to our mouths, in the sense that we feel uneasy and we want clarification on certain things. And I know that, and probably I shouldn't, or at times it should not be said. But we need to be careful that what we do anyway is we don't give credence to the worship of idol or anything, because anything can be an idol. Anything. A pen could be an idol. Attack. If I want to get really frivolous, attack could be an idol. Or the biggest thing is your house or your car or something that people can see. Not only that though, but it's what's in the heart. What's going on in the mind? What are you giving worship to? What are you giving more time to than to the living God? So that is what it was all about. In chapter 6 here, it is just, I would say, 14 verses. This probably is one of the shortest. I think there is another chapter that is about 10 chapters. Sorry, 10 verses in that chapter. But at times the verses can be quite chunky, can be quite meaty. And it is the verses really, not the length of it, but it's the verse that really gives food for thought. And I think that is what the Almighty, that's what his intention was. That when his people heard or read his word, like how we are reading it now, and at times when the minister, when your pastor, when your bishop, when the teacher, when someone who's called of God or moved by God to read these words or to address what the Almighty has given us, when we hear these words, then we must give it some thought. And giving it thought, make sure that we can line up with whatever the Almighty is saying in his word. So let me read the 14 verses of chapter 6. Won't say much on it. We will then go into that in the next session to take place. All right. So let us go from verse 1 of chapter 6 of Ezekiel. The word of Adonai came to me, human being, face toward the mountains of Israel and prophesy against them. Mountains of Israel, hear the word of Adonai Elohim. Here is what Adonai Elohim says about the mountains, hills, ravines, and valleys. I myself will bring a sword against you and destroy your high places. Your altars will be wrecked and your pillars for sun worship broken, and I will throw down your slain ones in front of your idols. I will lay the corpse of the people of Israel in front of their idols and scatter your bones all around your altars. Wherever or everywhere you live, the cities will be destroyed and the high places wrecked, so that your altars can be destroyed and wrecked, your idols broken and abolished, your pillars for sun worship cut down, and the things you have made wiped out. The slain will fall among you. Then you will know that I am Adonai. Nevertheless, I will leave a remnant, some who will escape the sword among the nations when they have been scattered throughout the countries. Those of you who escape will remember me among the nations where they have been exiled, how broken I have been over your whoring hearts that left me, and over their eyes that went whoring after their idols. They are going to be loathed themselves for all the evils they committed in their disgusting practices. Then they will know that I am Adonai. It isn't for nothing that I said I would bring this calamity upon them. Here's what Adonai Elohim said: strike your hand and stamp your foot and bemoan all the terrible, disgusting practices of the house of Israel, for they will fall by sword, famine, and plague. Those far away will die from the plague. Those nearby will fall by the sword, and whoever stays and is besieged will die from famine. This is how I will spend my fury on them. You will know that I am Adonai when their slain men are lying among their idols, around their altars, on every high hill, on every mountaintop, under every green tree, under every thick pistachio tree, wherever they offered sweet smelling sacrifices to appease their idols. I will stretch out my hand over them and make the land wherever they live into a desolate waste, worse than the Divla desert. Then they will know that I am Adonai. I'm not going to comment too much on this one at this moment, because remember, it is just an introduction into this particular chapter. But it's something I believe that I would like for you to, as we have read and as we will go into, something for us to think about, something I believe for us to meditate on. And there are 6 points that I believe that I'd like to leave with you as we go through this 6th chapter of Ezekiel. Number 1, then there are more pronouncements and warnings and purposes that God gave to Ezekiel to be the messenger to tell the people. God's pronouncement, number 1, is of judgment upon false worshippers. Remember, this is the end and judgment of false worship. So it's going to be more or less around the worship of idols. Number 2, God's promise to have mercy upon some false worshippers. Number 3, God's reason for executing judgment upon false worshippers. 4, God's warning to false worshippers. 5, God's purpose for executing judgment on false worshippers. And number 6, God's description of the coming judgment upon false worshippers. So there's a lot there that we can and that we are to glean from this chapter. Obviously, again, this goes over into the next chapter. Remember, chapters were not in the mind of Ezekiel when he wrote. He wrote this as one complete book, and it is very much to be seen as such, one continuous book, continuous prose, or continuous writing. But it was just for us to aid the man or the woman, the individual who would be reading this here and after. And it wasn't Ezekiel that put it into chapters, as I've said before. It was someone many hundreds of years later that thought they would help us by putting this particular book, and in other books also, into chapter and verses. So this is going to take chapter 6 and 7. But let's just concentrate at this moment on chapter 6. We're going to look at the pronouncements, the promises, the reasons, and the reasons. So let's look on those 3 things: the promises, the pronouncements, the promises, and the reasons of false worship and false worshipers. May God bless you. We'll pray again in the next session if you will allow me to. But have a great day. Enjoy yourself. But be reminded and remember to do not leave the Lord out in anything that you're doing or saying. Behave yourself. That's all I'm saying. Behave oneself.